Hello everyone, today we will be discussing chapter 7 Ashoka, the emperor who gave up war from the class 6 NCERT history book. This is an important chapter as it focuses on the transformation of Ashoka from a ruthless warrior king to a promoter of peace and non-violence and highlights his embrace of Buddhism. We will also link this chapter to the Vedic age, which we studied in the previous chapter, to see the evolution of leadership, the role of warfare, and the shift in moral and ethical governance in ancient India. In the Vedic age, society was organized around tribal group and a small kingdom. The Aryans, who settled in the northwestern part of India, engaged in frequent tribal warfare. Early Vedic texts like the Rig Veda mentions battles and conflicts, often revolving around cattle raids or territorial disputes. Indra, the chief deity in the Vedas, is depicted as a warrior god who helped the Aryans in their conflicts with various enemies. Warfare in the Vedic age was largely on a small scale compared to the large empire building campaigns seen later. Social structure was based on the Varna system Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudras. The Kshatriyas, as warriors, played a prominent role in defending the land and conducting military campaigns. At the start of a chapter, a picture of lion is shown. It is a lion capital. The lion capital of Ashoka is an important historical and cultural symbol of India. It was originally placed on top of a pillar built by Emperor Ashoka at Sarnath, which is near Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh, around 250 BCE. Sarnath is significant because it is where Buddha delivered his first sermon after attaining enlightenment. Now let's fast forward to the Mauryan Empire, specifically Ashoka. Ashok. Now Ashok was the third ruler of the Mauryan dynasty. Now what is a dynasty? It is written here. Dynasty is when members of the same family members become rulers one after another. That is known as the dynasty. Now founder of Mauryan Empire was Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya was born around 340 BCE in the Magad region. Magad region is in modern day Bihar. His exact origins are debated, but most sources suggest he came from a humble background. Some believes he was from a low caste family, possibly a Kshatriya or even a Shudra background. Meanwhile, interesting things were happening at the court of Dhanananda. As we have read in previous chapter, Nanda dynasty came before Mauryan dynasty. Dhanananda was the last king of Nanda dynasty. Dhanananda's rule was marked by inefficiency and unpopularity. Ancient texts suggest that he was a weak and despotic ruler, leading to dissatisfaction among his subjects and the military. His rule was seen as corrupt and he lacked strong political and military leadership. Chanakya, a Brahmin teacher and advisor, played a key role in removing Dhanananda from power. Chanakya, who had been insulted by the Nanda ruler, vowed to replace him with a better leader and identified Chandragupta as the future king. Chandragupta ascended the throne of Magad in 321 BCE and ruled for 24 years. Chanakya became his chief advisor and put to practice many of the theories of governance and taxation he had talked about in the Arthashastra. After Chandragupta Maurya established the Mauryan Empire in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent in the late 4th century BCE, he came into conflict with the successor of Alexander. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his vast empire in the west fragmented and his generals divided the territories among themselves. One of these generals, Seleucus Nicator, became the ruler of the eastern portion of the empire, Alexander's empire, which included parts of modern day Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And he eventually founded the Seleucid Empire. Armies of Seleucus and Chandragupta met at the Indus River in 305 BCE. And though we have no details, probably Chandragupta won because Seleucus withdrew, leaving him with land till Kandahar in Afghanistan. The treaty mentions marital alliance and historians wonder if Chandragupta also married a daughter of Seleucus. The two kings kept in touch and Greek ambassador named Megasthenes arrived at Patliputra soon after. By the end of 4th century BCE, there was a serious famine in Ganga Valley. Many Jain monks, led by Bhadrabhagu and Chandragupta Maurya, came to the Saravana Belagola in Karnataka. Those who stayed back in North India, were led by a monk named Sthulabahu, who changed the code of conduct for Jain monk. This led to the division of Jain monks into the two sects. These two sects are Digambara, meaning sky-clad or naked, or the Shwetambara, meaning white-clad. The first Jain council was held at Patliputra by Sthulabahu. the leader of the Digambars. In the beginning of 3rd century BCE, the second Jain council was held at Vallabhi in 5th century BCE. The final compilation of the Jain literature called the 12 Angas was compiled in this council. Let's see why exactly his kingdom was called an empire. Ashoka's kingdom, why it was called an empire. It is called an empire because empire is much larger than the kingdom, with many provinces and people of different races living in it. By the time of Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire extended from Bengal in the east to the Afghanistan in the west. The empire included most of the Indo-Gangetic plain, stretching from the Himalayas in the north down to the Deccan Plateau in the south. The capital of Ashoka's empire, Patliputra, is present-day Patna. It was a bustling political and cultural hub of the Mauryan Empire. Ujjain, a major city in the kingdom of Malwa, played an important role in trade and administration. We know the importance of this city from rock inscription, pillars, and stupas found at these places. Now the next section is ruling the empire. Imagine trying to run such a huge empire 2000 years ago. The Mauryan administration was very well organized. Taxes were collected efficiently and the king became very rich. The empire was divided into provinces, often ruled by princes, and the provinces were divided into districts. Let's learn about key administrative positions and institutions during the Mauryan period. The emperor or Raja was at the top of the administrative structure. The emperor had supreme authority and was responsible for the welfare of the state and the people. The Mantri Parishad advised the king on matters of policy and administration. The council included high-ranking officials like the Mahamantri, that is, chief minister. The Mahamantri was the senior most official after the king and played a central role in governance and policy decisions. Rajukas were governors appointed to oversee large provinces of the empire. The empire was divided into provinces, Mahanagars, and the districts, Janpadas. Each unit had its own administrative head. Like governor were for provinces and Sthanika for district. District officer known as the Sthanika were responsible for local governance, maintaining order, and overseeing trade and agriculture. The Mauryan army was highly organized with various ranked officials overseeing different units like cavalry, infantry, and elephants. Spies, that is Guptchars, were used extensively for intelligence gathering and to maintain surveillance over the population. The Mauryans had a well-organized judicial system to maintain law and order. Mahamantras served as judicial officers and were responsible for resolving disputes and delivering justice at both the local and regional levels. Let's delve into an important concept in ancient history, particularly within the context of the Mauryan Empire. That concept is tribute, a form of payment or contribution made by a subordinate kingdom or region to a more powerful empire. Tribute is essentially a payment made by a subordinate or conquered territory to a more powerful political entity, such as an empire or a king. It is a form of submission, loyalty, and acknowledgement of the superior power's dominance. Tribute differs from taxation in that it is often imposed upon conquered or subordinate territories as a form of submission or recognition of superiority, while taxation is usually a more formalized and structured payment demanded by a central government from its citizens. Tribute is often voluntary or agreed upon as a form of alliance or protection, whereas taxes are typically mandatory and enforced by law. Forest resources such as timber, wildlife product, medicinal plants, honey, and wax were given as tribute to the state. The state monopolized the extraction of certain forest products, and forest dwellers paid taxes in the form of these resources. Tribes could be called upon to provide corvée labor, which is a type of unpaid forced labor for public work or military service. In certain cases, forest dwellers might have enjoyed tax exemptions, particularly if they played a strategic role in the empire. Let's see what is the difference between empire and kingdom. Empires are larger and multi-regional. They span multiple regions, often with diverse cultures, language, and people. Kingdom is smaller, typically one region or a homogeneous territory. Empire expand through conquest, colonization, or unification of smaller states, while kingdom expands through marriage, marital alliance, or the limited conquest. We will now find the answer to the given question. We will now find the answer to the given question after reviewing this account of Megasthenes about the Mauryan Empire. First question is, why do you think the king had a special servant to taste the food he ate? The king likely had a special servant to taste his food during the Mauryan period, primarily to guard against poisoning or assassination attempts. This precautionary practice was an essential part of maintaining the king's safety and was a reflection of the volatile nature of royal politics and the real threats faced by rulers in ancient times. Now, the next is, in what ways was Patliputra different from Mohenjo-daro? Patliputra and Mohenjo-daro were two important cities in ancient India, but they were quite different in terms of their time period, location, urban structure, and function. Mohenjo-daro, located in the Sindh region, which is modern-day Pakistan, near the Indus River, the city was part of the Indus Valley civilization, which extended over a large area across modern-day Pakistan and northwest India. Patliputra, located near the Ganga River, modern-day Patna, Bihar, in the eastern part of India. It became a key city for several ancient Indian empires, including the Mauryan Empire and Gupta Empire. Mohenjo-daro is famous for its advanced urban planning, with a grid-like state system, drainage system, and public baths like the Great Bath, which indicate a highly organized urban society. Patliputra, by contrast, had a more complex urban structure with a combination of wooden, brick, and stone structures. It was a large, bustling city with the defensive walls, gates, palaces, temples, and administrative buildings. Mohenjo-daro was a sophisticated early urban center focused on trade, craftsmanship, and advanced infrastructure, but it did not have the political and military importance of a later empire capital like Patliputra. In contrast, Patliputra was the heart of Mauryan power, a bustling capital with monumental architecture, political influence, and the religious significance, particularly under Ashoka. The two cities represent different eras of Indian history. One, an ancient pre-empire trading city, and the other, a powerful empire-centered capital. Now we will learn about the most famous ruler of the Mauryan Empire, that is Ashoka. Before that, we should know a little bit about the Bindusar, who became a king after Chandragupta. Chandragupta stepped down from the throne around 297 BCE, making way for his son Bindusar. This is a crucial moment in history as Chandragupta chose to abdicate the throne voluntarily. After his abdication, he followed the Jain monk Bhadrabahu and migrated south to Shravana-Belagola in the present-day Karnataka, where he spent his final years practicing asceticism and self-denial. Bindusar, also known as Amritghata, that is, slayer of enemies, was the second emperor of the Mauryan Empire. Bindusar's accession to the throne was peaceful, reflecting the stability and strength of the Mauryan administration established by his father. There were no major challenges to his succession, indicating a well-established line of succession and strong imperial structure. Bindusar is known to have maintained diplomatic relations with the Hellenistic kingdom in the west, particularly with the Greek rulers in the Seleucid Empire. Bindusar's attitude toward Buddhism is noteworthy, especially considering that his son Ashoka would later become one of the greatest proponents of Buddhism. While Bindusar did not embrace Buddhism in the way Ashoka did, he is known to have had a favorable attitude towards the Buddhist monastic community. After the death of Bindusar in 273 BCE, Ashoka did not immediately succeed the throne. Bindusar had many sons, and according to some historical sources, there was a struggle for succession. Ashoka was not the direct heir, and it is believed that several of his brothers contested for the throne. Historical texts like the Mahavamsa, which is a Buddhist text, mention that Ashoka had to overcome strong opposition from his brothers to gain the throne. He is said to have had a ruthless rise to power, eliminating some of his brothers in the process, either through direct conflict or political maneuvering. In this sense, the succession was not peaceful, and Ashoka's path to the throne was marked by bloodshed. In ancient time, a king had to go on conquering land because more land meant more tribute and taxes. By the time Ashoka came to the throne, there were only one kingdom that was left to conquer, which was Kalinga, which is in modern-day Odisha. Kalinga was important because it had many ports on the Bay of Bengal and would make trading with the Far East easier. However, the war was particularly brutal, with over 1 lakh soldiers killed and many civilians suffering. The brutality of the war deeply affected Ashoka, and it marked a major turning point in his life. Witnessing the horrors of the war, Ashoka embraced Buddhism, a philosophy that emphasized ahimsa, non-violence, truth, compassion, and ethical living. He became a devoted follower of Buddha and began to follow the Buddhist path of moral law, that is, Dhamma. Ashoka began promoting the principle of Dhamma, which is a moral law, throughout his empire. Dhamma was a code of conduct that emphasized non-violence, respect for all living beings, tolerance for all religions, compassion for people and animals, simplicity and a focus on inner peace. Dhamma Mahamattas were officials appointed by Ashoka to oversee the spread and implementation of his Dhamma across the Mauryan Empire. They were responsible for promoting ethical behavior, compassion, and non-violence among the people and ensuring religious tolerance. Ashoka instructed that rocks and pillars be inscribed with his Dhamma. Ashoka did much for the welfare of his subjects. He built roads, he planted shady trees along them. He built inns for travelers, wells were dug, there were free hospitals for people and animals, and gardens were planted to grow medicinal herbs. The king went on tours every year to meet his subjects and listen to their problems. In Ashoka's kingdom, the drum war, the Bheri Ghosha, now fell silent, and the drum of Dhamma, that is Dhamma Ghosha, was now heard everywhere. However, this did not mean that he became a weak king. He gave up the policy of conquest and offered his friendship to other kingdoms instead. But he also kept his army ready to defend his empire against any attack. Ashoka was the first Indian king to realize that ruling over such a diverse nation as India, with so many languages, religion, cultures, needed a policy of religious tolerance. It was important that people learned to live peacefully together. The next ruler to realize this was the Mughal king Akbar, who of course had not heard of Ashoka. Two modern leaders who admired Ashoka greatly were Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. Here I want to mention Buddhist council which were held during the different time periods. The first Buddhist council is traditionally said to have been held just after Buddha's final nirvana and presided over by the Mahakashyapa, one of his senior most disciple, at a cave near Rajgriha, today's Rajgir, Bihar, which is in Bihar, with the support of King Ajatashatru. Its objective was to preserve the Buddha's saying, that is suttas and the monastic disciplines or rules. The suttas were recited by Ananda and the Vinaya was recited by Vinaya, which is rules. It was recited by Upali. Second Buddhist council was held at Vaishali, which is also in Bihar. It resulted in the division of Buddhism into Theravada and Mahayana traditions due to the doctrinal disputes mainly over Vinaya, which is a monastic discipline. The term Mahayana and Hinayan refers to the two major branches of Buddhism. The word Mahayana literally means great vehicle in Sanskrit. This school of Buddhism is often called the Greater Path because it emphasizes that anyone can attain enlightenment and that the enlightenment of all being is paramount. It is the most widespread form of Buddhism today, particularly in East Asia, that is China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and Tibet. While Mahayana Buddhism incorporates a variety of Buddhist deities, bodhisattvas, and celestial Buddhas, such as Amitabh, which is Buddha of infinite light, and Avalokiteshvara, which is Bodhisattva of compassion, and the next one is Hinayan. It is also called Theravada. The word Hinayan means lesser vehicle. However, it is important to note that the term Hinayan was originally used in derogatory sense by Mahayana followers to refer to the more conservative schools of Buddhism, particularly Theravada Buddhism. Hinayan is often not used anymore, and the term Theravada, which means teaching of the elders, is preferred in modern context. Theravada Buddhism is mainly practiced in Southeast Asia, including countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. Theravada emphasizes on Buddha as a human teacher, an enlightened being. There is a little or no emphasis on worshipping celestial deities or bodhisattvas. Now let's move on to the third Buddhist council, which was held at Patliputra under Emperor Ashok, which focused on standardizing the Buddhist teaching and sending missionaries across India and beyond. Now next one is fourth Buddhist council, which was held in 1st century CE at Kashmir under the King Kanishka of the Kushan Empire, who promoted Mahayana Buddhism and codified the Mahayana Sutras. It also encouraged the development of Buddhist art and architectures. Now the Next one is Fifth Buddhist Council, which was held in Rangoon, Burma in 1871 CE by King Mindon Min to inscribe the Pali Canon on stone tablets to preserve the Theravada text. Now there are also mention of another Buddhist council, that is Sixth Buddhist Council, which was held in Yangon, Myanmar. It aimed to preserve the Pali Canon and involved 2,500 monks reciting the entire Theravada scriptures. Here a picture of Rampurva bull is given. The Rampurva bull is a remarkable stone sculpture from the Mauryan period, showcasing the artistic brilliance of ancient Indian craftsmen. It is one of the key examples of Mauryan art, especially related to Emperor Ashoka's reign, and provides valuable insight into the symbolism and cultural practice of the time. It was found at Rampurva, a village in Champaran district, Bihar. The Rampurva Bihar bull is an excellent example of Mauryan sculpture, reflecting the realism, polish, and craftsmanship of the time. The Rampurva bull is currently housed in Rashtrapati Bhavan, that is Presidential Palace in New Delhi. The bull in ancient Indian culture symbolizes strength, fertility, and royalty. It was closely associated with agriculture and the earth, both central to ancient Indian life. The bull could also represent the power and prosperity of the Mauryan Empire under Ashoka's rule. The bull also has religious symbolism, particularly in the context of Buddhism. Under Ashoka, it may symbolize the spread of Buddhist ideas and non-violence, which he sought to promote after his conversion to Buddhism. Now let's see what was happening in other parts of the world. The Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China began its construction during the reign of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, around the same time that Ashoka was ruling the Mauryan Empire in India. While the Great Wall built by Qin was not a massive stone wall we think of today, it laid the groundwork for future fortification to protect the northern frontier of China. The Great Wall, like Ashoka's Dhamma and Buddhist missions, represent a significant effort to protect and define the empire, albeit in a very different ways. Let's look at this question. In what ways do you think Ashoka's attitude toward neighboring people was different from that of the Chinese Empire? Ashoka initially expanded the Mauryan Empire through military conquest, notably the Kalinga War. However, after the war's devastating impact, Ashoka embraced Buddhism and adopted a policy of peace and non-violence. He shifted from territorial expansion to promoting peaceful coexistence with neighboring kingdoms, focusing on diplomacy and religious tolerance. Emperors like Qin Shi Huang and Han Wudi focused on territorial expansion and military strength. Qin Shi Huang unified China through military conquest, while Han Wudi expanded China's border significantly, conquering territories in Central Asia and establishing Silk Road for trade. Diplomacy was often linked to tribute system or military dominance rather than moral governance or religious diplomacy. After his conversion to Buddhism, Ashoka used religion to guide his foreign policy, promoting non-violence, compassion, and tolerance for all religions. He spread Buddhism and its teaching through missionaries, encouraging a universal message of peace. Confucianism was the state ideology, emphasizing order, hierarchy, and loyalty to the state. While Taoism and Buddhism later influenced Chinese culture, early Chinese rulers like Qin Shi Huang and Han Wudi focused on strengthening the state through military power and centralized rule, not religious diplomacy. Now the next section is imagine, and this section's question is that you live in Kalinga and your parents have suffered in the war. The messenger from Ashoka has just arrived with the new ideas about Dhamma. Describe the dialogue between them and your parents. I strongly advise you to do this exercise on your own. While history is about facts, it is also about understanding the human experience. The exercise of creating dialogues encourages you to empathize with the people from the past, their hope, fears, and their struggles. UPSC and UPPSC demands that you present fact not just that as they are, but also with depth and clarity. Role-playing or writing a dialogue forces you to organize your thoughts, make connection between events, and present them in a structured and cohesive manner. This will aid you in the writing analytical answer during the exam. Now next section is let's recall. Question number 1 is make a list of the occupations of the people who lived within the Mauryan Empire. The Mauryan Empire was vast, and its people were involved in a variety of occupations based on their social roles, regional needs, and the economy. Some common occupations were agriculture. Majority of the population worked in agriculture, growing crops like rice, wheat, barley, and millet. People who worked on farms helping with planting, harvesting, and maintaining crops. Next is trade and commerce. Traders who sold goods locally and across the empire, such as grain, textile, spices, and metalwares. Shipmen carried goods via land routes or by sea to far off regions, engaging in long distance trade. Craftsmanship, blacksmiths made metal tools, weapons, agriculture implements. Potters created pottery used in daily life and for trade. Carpenters made wooden structures, furnitures, and boats. Government officials employed by the Mauryan state to manage administration, taxes, law, and order. Tax collectors collected taxes from farmers, traders, and others on the behalf of the government. Priests conducted religious ceremonies, especially in temples. Ashoka's support for Buddhism led to many people becoming monks, spreading the teaching of Buddha. The Mauryan Empire had a wide range of occupation from farming to trading, craftsmanship, military service, and religion. Understanding these professions helps us understand the daily lives of people and the empire's economy. Now, next is complete the following sentences. Number 1 is official collected from the area under the direct control of the ruler. In the Mauryan Empire, tax collection was a key function of the state, with officials collecting taxes from the areas directly under royal control. This system was highly structured, involving various administrative levels, and the tax collected was essential for maintaining the empire's infrastructure, army, and public welfare. So the answer will be tax. Next is royal princes. Royal princes were indeed appointed as governors of provinces during the Mauryan Empire. This was a common practice in Mauryan administrative system. The central government, especially under rulers like Chandragupta Maurya and Bindusar, appointed royal family members, including their sons, to manage important provinces. Now the next question is, the Mauryan rulers tried to control and which were important for transport. The answer would be road and river. The Mauryan Empire recognized the critical importance of road and rivers for the administration, trade, military mobility, and the communication of the empire. Under the rule of Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka, the Mauryan state invested heavily in the construction and control of these transportation networks to ensure the smooth functioning of the empire, which enhanced the economic activity and maintained security. So yes, Mauryan rulers actively control both roads and rivers, recognizing them as key to the empire's prosperity and stability. This infrastructure was central to the success of the Mauryan Empire and helped in its governance over such a vast territory. Next question is, people in forested regions provided the Mauryan officials with. The people in the forested region of the Mauryan Empire provided important resources such as timber, wild animals, medicinal plants, minerals, and food products. These resources were vital for the economy and the military strength of the empire and were collected as part of the state system of taxation and tribute. Mauryan officials ensured the efficient management of these resources, which were crucial to the prosperity and administration of the empire. Now the next section is true or false. So the first statement is Ujjain was the gateway to the northwest. It is false. Ujjain was a gateway to the north-south route in ancient India, but not the northwest. Let me show you Ujjain in the map. Ujjain is around here. It was a key link between the northern and southern region of India, not between the northwest and the rest of India. The gateway to the northwest was Takshila, not Ujjain. Next is Chandragupta's ideas were written down in the Arthashastra. Now it is false. While Chandragupta Maurya was the ruler, the Arthashastra is often seen as a manual of governance that Kautilya provided to him. In fact, Kautilya's Arthashastra was likely written after Chandragupta rise to power, providing a theoretical foundation for the governance of the Mauryan Empire. Next is Kalinga was the ancient name of Bengal. No, Kalinga was not the ancient name of Bengal. Kalinga and Bengal were two distinct regions in ancient India, each with its own geographical and cultural significance. Kalinga is modern day Odisha. Kalinga was an ancient region located along the eastern coast of India, roughly corresponding to the parts of present day Odisha and northern Andhra Pradesh. Now the next question is, Most Ashokan inscription are in the Brahmi script. While Brahmi was the primary script used, Kharosti was also used for some inscription, particularly in the region of northwest India, such as in Takshila and part of Afghanistan. Now the next section is let's discuss. First is what were the problems that Ashoka wanted to solve by introducing Dhamma. Now Ashoka introduced Dhamma to solve several problems within an empire like violence and war. After the bloodshed of Kalinga War, Ashoka wanted to promote peace and non-violence, moral and ethical decay. He saw a decline in moral values such as greed, hatred, and dishonesty, and aimed to encourage people to adopt compassion, truthfulness, and respect. Social harmony, he wanted to reduce conflict between different religion, caste, and communities by promoting respect for all human beings. Now the next question is, what were the means adopted by Ashoka to spread the message of Dhamma? Now Ashoka spread the message of Dhamma by using inscription. He carved his teaching on pillars and rocks throughout the empire to reach the people. By Dhamma Mahamattas, he appointed a special official to promote Dhamma and ensure people's welfare. By sending missionaries, Ashoka sent Buddhist monks to spread Dhamma and Buddhism within India and beyond, like in Sri Lanka. By public welfare, he built roads, hospitals, and provided care for both people and animals. By promoting tolerance, Ashoka encouraged respect and tolerance for all religion. Next question is, why do you think slaves and servants were ill-treated? Do you think the orders of the emperor would have improved their conditions? Now, slaves and servants in modern period were often ill-treated because of the social hierarchy and economic condition. They were at the bottom of the society and he had few rights, often treated as property. Ashoka's order based on his Dhamma would have improved their condition to some extent. His teaching emphasized compassion, fairness, non-violence, encouraging better treatment of all people, including slaves and servants. Now, however, since our social structure were deeply entrenched and the impact of Ashoka's reform might have been limited, and it would have been difficult to fully change their status or conditions, nonetheless, his policies could have helped improve their treatment over time. Now, before we begin new chapter, which is vital villages and thriving towns, it is important to first understand the dynasties which emerged after the fall of Mauryan Empire. The next 500 years were a period of political instability in India, with many kingdoms rising and falling. I believe it would be helpful to discuss this briefly so we can have a clearer understanding of the kingdoms that existed before the rise of Gupta Empire. Now we will connect with you in the next video. Thank you.